Welcome to Divine Justice YouTube channel. The war between Ukraine and Russia is escalating. Towards the end of January, the Ukrainian and Russian forces want to make serious gains in the war with critical moves. At the moment, with the increase in tension and violence, both sides are calculating the steps to be taken over and over, while the eastern regions of Ukraine are still in flames. Ukrainian soldiers defending the front lines in Donbass describe clashes as reminiscent of the First World War. Vladimir Putin's army recklessly sends its soldiers to slaughter in Ukraine, while desperately seeking military gains on the battlefield. Clashes were particularly fierce in the Donbass region in the east of the country, where Russian forces captured Soledar after weeks of relentless attacks. The Kremlin now hopes its army can pressure and capture Bakhmut as it tries to maintain the offensive momentum, but Russia's gains come at a great cost, with hundreds of soldiers killed in the process. The Russian commanders proved that they had little respect for the lives of their men by sending waves of weakly armed infantry to try and attack the fortified Ukrainian positions. In addition, the mercenaries of the Wagner Group are trying to be very active, especially in the direction of Soledar and Bakhmut. Although the Wagner leaders' striking statements from time to time bring the Russian forces and Wagner gang members face to face, Ukraine is currently fighting against two fronts in the eastern regions, especially in the areas covering these two cities. With Russia's plans this week, the violence of the attacks continues to increase rapidly. In the critical war in Donbass, which has now turned into a frontal clash, the Russians generally try to get as close to the defensive positions in Donbass as they can in order to throw their grenades into the Ukrainian trenches. And also, the invading forces are trying to make warm contact with the Ukrainian soldiers using AK-47 type weapons on the front lines in the eastern regions of Ukraine. For this very purpose, the Moscow administration is sending less trained Russian soldiers, those who can barely carry weapons, to the front lines of the war. The Ukrainian armed forces, on the other hand, continue to intensify their offensive operations in order to turn the situation of the Russians into an advantage. In this regard, Ukraine carried out a striking ambush operation near Bakhmut yesterday. The ambush, carried out by the Ukrainian border guard in the direction of Bakhmut, unexpectedly by the Russian invaders, left its mark on the agenda. Ukrainian border guards neutralized 26 Russian invaders in the direction of Bakhmut. Yesterday morning, the Russian occupation forces tried to break through the defense line held by a division of the Ukrainian State Border Guard Service. The border guards resisted the Russian attacks, and a second group of guards ambushed the Russians from behind, stopping the advance of the invading troops with small arms and fire from grenade launchers. In addition, the Ukrainian defenders managed to seize the weapons and military equipment of the Russian forces in this area. The Department of Strategic Communications of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, in its situation report published on Telegram, stated that the Russian infantry in the Bakhmut region was defeated with the help of artillery and mortars and retreated with losses. As a result of these attacks by the Ukrainian forces, 9 Russian soldiers were killed and about 17 injured. In addition, the Ukrainian National Guard said on Saturday, January 21st, that it had launched attacks on Russian troops on facilities in Kurdyumivka in Ukraine's Donetsk region and released drone footage of the attack. The heavy attack of the National Guard was unexpected for the Russians. Russian troops were circling the facility and its environs. The Ukrainian drone recorded the operation moment by moment. The Russian military facility was blown up by the National Guard. The invading troops near the military facility began to run around and flee in shock after the attack. The video showed people who were told by the Ukrainian National Guard to be Russian soldiers marching towards a building. Strikes were taking place, and people were running for shelter. Reuters was able to locate the video from the matching structures and landscape in satellite images. However, it could not be confirmed when the images were taken. Severe injuries sustained by Russia in recent days continue to disrupt the occupiers' offensive operations in and around Donetsk, Ukraine. After the last Ukrainian offensive operation in Bakhmut, the casualties of the Russian forces were shared with the media again. The figures are seriously hovering at values that will create huge problems for the Moscow administration. As Divine Justice YouTube channel, all of our findings are created by the studies and analyses of our field warfare expert team and are based on data from the US, UK, Russia, and Ukrainian Ministries of Defense, and independent war analysis and monitoring sources. The Ukrainian military claims that more than 120,000 Russian soldiers have been killed since the invasion began on February 24, 2022. These losses are believed to have involved both Russian forces and the Wagner mercenary group. As reported, the Wagner group lost around 40,000 soldiers in the battles for Bakhmut and Soledar alone, making up about 2/3 of that body. On the other hand, according to figures released by Kiev, more than 20,000 Russian soldiers were killed in the war in Ukraine last month. Although unconfirmed, these figures may indicate the ever-increasing trend of losses by Moscow forces. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces announced in an update last Saturday that 860 Russian soldiers were purged in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of casualties 120,160 since the invasion began on February 24th. On December 21st, the Ukrainian General Staff had already stated that the Russian death toll had exceeded 100,000. Also, given these figures, it can be clearly calculated that Moscow forces lose an average of 10,000 soldiers every month. These striking figures follow Ukraine's figures released on January 7th, which point to a large increase in casualties, with an estimated 10,000 Russian soldiers killed in the 2 weeks between December 21st and January 5th. The Ukrainian General Staff's update released last Saturday also reveals that Russia lost a total of 3,140 tanks, 6,256 armored combat vehicles, and 2,135 artillery systems. Russia, which has confirmed that only 5,937 Russian soldiers have died so far, does not often disclose casualty figures. These losses, announced by the Russian administration on the other hand, are evaluated as data that have not been proven to be correct in any way and have been reduced to avoid reaction. Like Russia, Ukrainian forces were seriously wounded in this war. Germany's Federal Intelligence Service expressed its concerns about the high casualties of Ukraine in the fierce battle for the city of Bakhmut in the Donetsk region. Although the BND has declared Russian casualties to be high, according to a translation of the publication, the Ukrainian army is currently losing triple-digit numbers of soldiers every day in clashes around the city. While the Russians continue their search for allies to make up for these military losses, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, one of Vladimir Putin's closest supporters, continues to support Moscow. As reported, on January 16th, joint aviation and tactical exercises began, with the participation of units of the Belarusian and Russian air forces. The Belarusian government, which was constantly trying to provide attack ramps to Russia, for a certain time posed a great threat to Ukraine. But at the moment, the situation in the Belarusian direction is completely under control, since the movement of Russian military equipment near the border is not observed. Of course, the situation is somewhat tense, but this aspect remains fully controlled. We understand that Belarus supports the Moscow administration in Russia's war against Ukraine and offers it the territory of constant exercises. Andriy Demchenko, spokesman for the State Border Guard Service, explained that, as before, the Ukrainian side did not record any movement of military equipment directly near the border, and no Russian warplanes moving deep into Belarusian territory were flown in the region. Although the intelligence units and other elements that have been monitoring the situation in this direction so far do not see that they have created a coup group that can invade Belarusian territory from today, the invading troops should never be taken lightly. That is why the Ukrainian forces fiercely continue the preparatory work before the spring. In response to these Russian preparations, Ukraine's allies also stressed the importance of these tanks after discussing military aid to Kiev this week at a meeting where there was a deadlock over the supply of German-made Leopard 2 tanks, which are used by NATO members but require permission from Berlin to ship. Countries such as Poland have expressed their desire to send advanced tanks. However, permission from Berlin is required to re-export them and send them to the Ukrainian armed forces. If the Berlin government, which is now seen as the key to this lock, approves the delivery of Leopard 2 tanks to the Ukrainian army, Kiev will have gained a lot of strength in frontal struggles against the invading forces before the spring season arrives. Other European countries are now completely focused on Germany's position. It seems that increasing pressure on Berlin for this critical decision to come out as soon as possible will speed up the approval of this shipment. Let's wait and see all these possibilities come true. Thank you for watching us.